everyone, I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to the Paranormal Yakker. My guest on today's show is Joe Eigo. Joe is a master healer who was on a very special mission. That mission is to awaken humanity, create an enlightened society, and heal the world. And if anyone can do it, because I know him for a long time, it's definitely him. Joe Eigo, welcome to the Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you so much, Stan. I'm really excited to be back on your show.
Joe, the mission you have undertaken, I don't have to tell you, while it's noble and it is also a very challenging one. And with the sad state of affairs the world is in now, it's very much needed, that's for sure. But it can't be an easy one to accomplish. Joe, what motivated you to take it on?
Well, I work in the movie business, right? I got involved in the movie business close to 20 years ago, right after 9/11 happened. And I guess a lot of people during that time went through a lot of reality shocks. So, working in the movie business, you work with a lot of wealthy and famous people. And over time, you kind of question what makes somebody really happy. So I started getting involved in metaphysics. I started reading a lot of books in my late 20s. And, I guess when you go through a lot of traumas in your life, you start even with relationships or career, things like that, or even near-death experiences. It puts you in a vibration where you kind of reevaluate the whole perspective of where you were before. And then I started praying a lot. I started taking a lot of meditation classes, and I came across a practice known as Reiki. And, a lot of the Reiki practitioners that I met, they always kept telling me to work with crystals. I'm holding a big crystal right now. This is my latest crystal. And they said, if you pray with these crystals and you meditate with them and you have really intense dreams with them, you'll be guided in these dreams to do great things. So I put out a prayer in around 2012. It was around June. I asked God, I said, show me in a dream tonight to serve the world better. So I had a dream that night where I was exploring a lost city under the ocean called Atlantis. And there's these giant crystals in the city under the water, and they're being guarded by these dolphins. So I grabbed the crystals in my dream, and I woke up, and I had this thought, I need to find these Atlantean crystals, and I need to experience what kind of power comes out of them. So I went all the way to California. I held a crystal that was kind of like this, a lot smaller. And the energy coming through it started to give me visions for 3 days. I was having these intense dreams using the crystals for healing people, changing water structures, opening these portals, these doorways. And the last one was affecting the weather. So, I was like, wow, that's such an intense dream. I might as well just get this crystal. And then shortly after buying that crystal, I had a dream of much bigger crystals. And just a couple of months ago, I had a recent dream about these crystals that were so deep inside the earth. There was these spirits living inside these crystals, spirits that look like extraterrestrials from other worlds. And they were guiding me, saying, you gotta be a bridge between our world and your world. Teach people how, there's lots of information inside the crystals. We're in the age of the crystal now, and everything electronic has crystals. And if people know how to use crystals in a special way, they can use the power with their prayers to magnify energies and affect changes.
What I would like to do now, Joe, is to discuss the three key aspects of your mission. Your first mission is to awaken humanity. What are you awakening humanity from, and how do you plan to do that?
Well, I always believe in alchemy, right? People want to change the world, and if you want to see the world change, you have to be the change yourself. You have to be a warrior. Being a warrior in our world today requires a lot of courage. Speaking about things that people don't understand, it's natural to be called crazy. There's a lot of solutions in our world today, and a lot of people are afraid to be called crazy. So when you vibrate at that, where your truth is all about, sharing to the world, you have a duty. You have a moral obligation to teach other people. And when we look at the situation in the world today, it's very similar to what happened when 9/11 happened, but it's at a very extreme level now. The whole world economy is shut down and people are in fear. But then there's a lot of people that are not in fear, and they start to vibrate in a way that affects changes. And, there's a lot of prophecies that speak about that. So for a lot of people that believe in reincarnation, If we had to live for thousands of years and be locked up in our homes for thousands of years, this is the kind of reality we want to live in, right?
Hmm. Now, your second mission is to create an enlightened society. How do you do that when so many people, regretfully, are closing their eyes and ears to what's happening around them, and they would rather be in the dark than in the light?
Well, if we study history and let's say we get all the records from history inside a crystal, we can look at ancient civilizations like Atlantis. And a lot of people would imagine back in Atlantis, we live in a perfect world. Everybody treats the world like they treat their bodies. They don't see themselves any separate. People are living long, healthy lives. They have free energy technologies. They're using crystals with pyramids. Nothing bad could ever happen. But the same thing that happened to Atlantis is happening in our world today. And back then, a lot of the spiritual people saw what was coming, and they saw that all the libraries would be destroyed. So what they did was they put all their knowledge into crystals, and they buried them deep inside the earth. They knew that one day spiritual people will find these crystals and use them and remember what took place during that time and use that sacred knowledge, because knowledge is power, to restore balance to the world. So I always try to remind people, when you're working with psychic powers, you got to learn to bridge spirituality with science, and then you'll be able to do a lot more. So I try to explain to people that everything in our world today is a vibration. What we see in the world today is a result of some sort of mind control vibration put on us. I mean, there's a lot of us and there's a few of the evil, but the evil uses mind control and fear. So when people get inspired by somebody who's not afraid, it inspires changes in the world.
Your third mission, and probably the most difficult, is that you want to heal the world. How do you even begin doing something like that?
I think it starts with your body. If we look at our bodies, right? Our bodies are like multi-dimensional. We have a physical body, we have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and a spiritual body. So a body that's clean and healthy, becomes a stronger conduit for the Holy Spirit to flow through. When your body is polluted, like the world that we live in today has a lot of pollution. I think the biggest pollution in our world today is the negative thoughts that are put on us. So I try to remind people, when you learn to have more faith in your life than fear, your imagination gets stronger. And I always try to remind people that imagination is greater than knowledge. So, for a lot of people that have this faith that there's a better world coming, they're going to look at solutions. It's obvious the old world wasn't working, right? We have to solve the world problems with a new way of thinking. And that's where imagination comes from. We can't solve the world problems with the same way of thinking as the old world. So one of the things I like to do for healing the earth is to teach people how we can use our psychic powers with crystals to affect changes such as in the body. Thoughts can affect water. And if we can affect the water in our bodies, we can also affect the water outside our bodies, which is represented in the weather. And it gets pretty deep, but for a lot of people these days that are kind of questioning, hey, what's going on with the weather? Aren't you guys in BC having 30-degree weather, but us in Toronto are having like -2, -4? How do we affect change with the weather? And when people start to realize that everybody in the ancient times was using that kind of gift, if we can change the weather, we can also change the world. Because those who control the weather can definitely control the world. They can blame it on some sort of crisis like global warming. They can blame it on some sort of way that, we got to pay our carbon taxes. But as people start to go beyond the information that's being projected on them, they're going to come up with their own information. And there's going to be a lot more people that are going to learn that they can use this sacred technology too. Whether it's a big crystal, a small crystal, you got to imagine yourself as a crystalline structure in a world that doesn't have that structure. And the more you line up with that structure, the more you start to vibrate in a way that affects change. I mean, look at everything in nature: beehives, ice crystals, honeycombs, even natural crystals. They have this sacred geometric structure to them. So it all starts from within you. Like if you want to become that gold, you got to transform that lead inside you, the lower vibration, into a much higher vibration. Like I said before, it's alchemy. So it's a lot of people who think a little different. Sometimes they feel very familiar when they see a crystal. They see something that reminds them of what they used to do in ancient times. So there's a lot of different things to say when it comes to these mission statements, and it's almost like a habitual ritual. when you make prayer like your habitual ritual, but you magnify prayer, right?
And what you just talked about, weather, is a perfect segue to my next question for you. Thank you for that. Now, you are into weather shamanism and consider yourself a climate warrior. Could you expand on that? Thank you.
Well, I started playing with that type of energy 10 years ago. I read a lot of books about masters that, once they open their third eye, they can develop several types of psychic powers. And some of those powers they can develop are manipulating the elements. So it started off as a small hobby. And then in 2014, it got very serious. I went to California, and I was there years before that. And every year I go back to California to this special mountain called Mount Shasta. I noticed things were changing. And then one year I went back in February of 2014, and there was a massive drought that was happening there. And the people were telling me, there's posters going around the town talking about how they're spraying the atmosphere with these chemicals, blocking out the rain. So I actually went outside, I looked at the sky, and I saw a lot of these chemicals being sprayed by these jets. And, I thought about this because I've seen those kind of chemicals for years. And I thought to myself, hey, it could be some sort of pollution. But the more I looked at the skies, I was looking at that these jets were doing it on purpose. And they're doing it in such a way that they're blocking out the rain clouds. So I started to research, what could I do to inform people about it? Then that night I had a vision. I had a vision that night that the Archangel Michael told me, take that crystal that you have, point it at those chemtrails and pray, visualize us as these orbs of light flying towards the chemtrails and cleaning up the sky. So I kept doing it. I kept praying and pointing the crystal, and the sky cleared up. Eventually they said, why don't you command us to bring a storm and teach people how you work with us and the crystal and watch what happens. So I'd be driving down the highway in California, listening to my favorite trance music. And then this thought came into my mind where I said, I would say out loud, I say, God, give California lots of rain. I start chanting it while I was driving. And as I'm driving, the wind started picking up. And more as I kept singing it, everything around me started shifting. These big storm clouds kept coming in. So I went to California literally 5 times that year to test it out in the midst of like the biggest fires. And it always worked. So I went to other countries, tested it out. And in 2016, I went to Alberta when there was a big fire. And I told my friends, look, there's a big fire in Alberta. If somebody pays for my plane ticket, I'll go out there with these crystals and show people if I could do this, what's stopping someone else from doing it. So I've been showing people how easy it is for us to use this psychic power. Even with the whole thing with Australia. Australia was burning for many months. Early this year, my family and I, we went out to Alberta and we prayed on full moons with these crystals to bring so much rainstorms to them. And in a short time, they got so much storms, but they expected the storms were going to come in May. And Australia was on the news for having the biggest fires in the world. Like, they were comparing the fires in Australia to like North America, and they were massive. So it just shows that people can do stuff, whether they're there or they're remotely far away. But it's teaching people how to pray again, and how, one person who has a lot of faith is like 99 people with a small interest.
Now, I know, Joe, over the years, you've made many trips to Mount Shasta, as well as other areas that have strong spiritual energy. I know it because I tried to get you as a guest on many shows. You're here, you're there, you're all over, you're doing good. That's great. What draws you to these places, and what do you do when you're there?
Well, I study sacred sites around the earth. They're just like our bodies, right? Our bodies have chakra systems, and the earth has chakra systems too. And Mount Shasta is the root chakra of the earth. I read a bunch of books that said, if you're very spiritual and you go to some place like Mount Shasta, these masters will appear to you. And I thought, at the time when I read that, I was like, this is interesting, because I feel like I'm going through a lot of spiritual experiences. Like in 2010, when my third eye opened up, I have some crazy stories about that. But, for 2 years, a lot of paranormal things have happened to me, and I literally started going to Mount Shasta because I was like, I need to go to some place that's going to heal myself, recharge my aura, and give me better instructions of what I need to do next. So when I went there in 2012, I saw one of these crystals. At the time, I thought, it's a little too expensive. Let me think about it. But some crazy things happened to me. Like, I experienced Sasquatches over there. I experienced an ascended master speaking through somebody who was channeling them. Name is Saint Germain, and Saint Germain was like literally talking to me through this person, explaining that I'm also a master like them, and I need to come back more often. And I was a little bit overwhelmed at the time. I was like, whoa, wait a second. I'm just kind of like dabbling into this. Like, this is like a lot of information taken at once. And they encouraged me to keep coming back. So every time I got going to Mount Shasta, more paranormal things were happening to me. I actually captured photos of the beings that live within the mountain that change vibration. So there's been times where I go there and these forces literally show themselves to me. And I mean, all the books that I read kept talking about that. So what I do when I go to these sacred sites is simple. I get up on the mountain isolated to a really deep meditation, and I'll take one of my crystals out like this. And when I get my vibration really high after I have breakfast and I go to the hot springs and I do some, exercise, I'll aim the crystal towards my hands to measure the light going through the tip. And I'll start saying a series of different prayers. And when you're at a sacred site like that, your prayers magnify thousands of times stronger. And a lot of times those prayers that I'll say at Mount Shasta are like mantras that start with the words I am. So whatever you say with the words I am, after that, you magnify it. So I tried it with different crystals and it worked great. But now my favorite vortex here in the Western Canada is in Alberta. It's about a 12-hour drive. It's called Lake Louise. And I have to say, it's one of the most holy sites I've ever been to in the world.
Now, you trained in different healing modalities and have created your own styles based on them, but you also incorporate special tools in your healing practice. What are these tools and how do you employ them?
Well, these tools that I use are called Vogel Crystals, and I was trained in Reiki in 2009. And back then, I was playing with Reiki. I was just going up to people and I was, putting my hands close to their bodies, and they can feel like electromagnetic energy going through it. So I started to research what can I do to make it stronger. And then I watched demonstrations of masters taking that power to a much higher level. And once I started getting into crystals, before I got into these type of crystals, I was using Reiki with the crystals, and it was magnifying the Reiki power. Some of the crystals I had nice tips on them, so the energy was coming off the tip like a laser beam. The moment I got into these crystals, the Reiki power got even stronger. I was using these crystals on people in the beginning, just pointing it at their bodies, and I can detect what's inside their bodies without even touching them. A lot of these clients have tumors inside of them, and when you're pointing the crystal close to their bodies and you're moving it around, you can feel something coming out of their body, like almost like a glue going into the crystal. And over time, a lot of these clients will come back to me after I do a short treatment with them, and the tumors vanish, or they shrank down completely. But before I started even using the crystals on people, I was playing with water. I was pointing these crystals at containers of water, and when I was just laughing, the water started to taste different. I was like, this is like a magic wand that has a laser on the tip. What happens if I get bigger ones? What can I do with it? So over time, I started using it on the earth and using it to play with weather patterns. And then over time, I use it to send healing power to certain people across the planet. So I feel like these tools are very rare. There's not a lot of these crystals out there, but in the hands of people who are dedicated to healing the world, they're going to appear in your dreams first.
Joe, you now reside for the most part in British Columbia. How do the vibes, the energies there differ from those in Toronto, where you lived for so many years? And I ask you this because I'm finding many people I know who are into energy are gravitating from the East Coast to the West Coast. Why is that?
But I was born in Toronto, right? So, I mean, most of my life, I can say, it was a great town to be in. But when you travel to other places and then you come back to visit Toronto, you feel immediately something different there. And I can say that Toronto has a lot of negative energy for a very special reason, And so for a lot of people who want to go out to other places and feel the vibration shifts, I mean, here in BC, you're going to definitely feel a lot better. The air is a lot cleaner. There's a lot more mountains. The vibe is different. People in Toronto are definitely like focused on work. It's like you're part of a giant machine. But here it's a lot more laid back, and there's definitely a different feel to the people's energy out here. I mean, a lot of people say, The East Coast is more Atlantean, and the West Coast is more Lemurian. And when you look back in those stories of Lemuria, they said the people back in Lemuria were like natural shamans, natural wizards. They were more connected with using crystals, with spiritual practices to make the world a peaceful place. But the Atlanteans start off as really nice civilization, but they became power driven. And you can imagine back in those times, the two nations or the two colonies around the world were not in peaceful balance with each other. So I mean, there's a lot of history when it comes back to places in the world that you feel familiar with. And for a lot of people that believe in past lives, sometimes they come back to a place like BC and they're like, hey, I feel at home here.
Now, you're very much into crystals, obviously, specifically the Vogel crystals. For those who don't know what Vogel crystals are, can you answer that and explain why you find them such powerful healing tools?
Well, the name Vogel crystal came from a scientist named Marcel Vogel. He worked for IBM, and he was responsible for a lot of technologies that involve crystals. I mean, crystals can store a lot of information, but he was given a crystal from Ontario long ago. He passed away in 1991, and this lady told him, this crystal is very special. I think you should take it. And that night, he had a vision to cut a crystal that looked like those the structures in Egypt. It was rectangular, and then it had 2 points on both sides. And at the time, he was doing experiments on how plants can detect energy. And when he cut a crystal with those type of geometric patterns, he realized that the thoughts that he was projecting towards plants at different distances was getting stronger. Then he started using it in healing practices. So Vogel crystal is the name of the style of crystal. When he first started, the crystals were very simple in geometry, and he's just like Nikola Tesla. A lot of these scientists over time, they were given visions in their dreams to take something that was lost long ago and bring it back to Earth. So for a lot of people that are into metaphysics, a crystal like this, if it's not known as a Vogel crystal, it also makes a sacred geometric pattern known as the Kabbalah, the tree of life. So for a lot of people that study sacred geometry, the tree of life, the flower of life has all the sacred geometric patterns in the universe cut into them. So what it does, it pulls energy in from one side, which is called a phi crystal, phi representing the infinite spiral, and it draws energy in through the windows and bounces it around 144 times and comes out the front like a refined laser. So there's a lot of different names for these type of crystals. Some people call them phi crystals. I like to call them Atlantean crystals. Some people call them Vogel crystals. So there's quite a lot of different ways to call this crystal technology. In fact, the ancient people were using crystals like this with pyramids, and they would place on top of a pyramid a phi crystal like this, and the crystal would draw the energy into the pyramid and store it into a capacitor known as the Ark of the Covenant. So back in the ancient times, people were using crystals with pyramids to draw unlimited supply of power from the universe. But you can only imagine if you have unlimited supply of power and then you have a limited way of thinking, it's very easy to abuse that power, right? So I believe there will come a time on the earth where people will be given a technology that the ancient people used, but we have to use it more responsibly. You can only imagine if this is the year 2020 when other visitors from other worlds make themselves known, and they're gonna want to help us in a unique way. And for a lot of people throughout time that have made contact with these sort of forces, they're gonna write those people off as crazy. But the biggest teaching of all the secret societies is how do you communicate with spirits, or even good ones, right? To receive good information. So I always tell people it's all about the power of the dream. If your dreams are pure and your heart is in the right place, these tools will come to you at the right speed.
Now, you're a bundle of energy and always have been in all the years I've known you, Joe. When people are in your presence, even when without the crystals, they can feel that electricity emanating from you. And with the crystal, it's even compounded more. Did you ever give thought that you might have been a healer in a previous lifetime?
Well, it's funny that you say that, but when I was a baby, I remember looking in the mirror the first time, and all I could think about was, oh my goodness, why am I Asian again, right? And all I could think about was like, I remembered recently that I wasn't Asian, and I was a soldier, and then the other thought that came through my mind was like, I need to remember all my other past lives in order for me to remember what my last mission was on the earth. I didn't come here to conform to the ways of this world. And that was the biggest thought that went through my mind before I even started speaking. So over time, in my mid-20s, I started seeing psychics. I would never do that sort of thing. I used to make fun of psychic energy growing up. But I went through a breakup at the time, and I wanted to hear something I never heard before. And a lot of the psychics kept telling me about my past lives. One of them, they kept saying, you were like a Tibetan monk. You should focus on that one. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then
Yes.
other people were telling me, I had past lives that were like shamans. So I started watching videos on shamans, and I was like, what are these shamans really good at doing? It reminded me of a story I wrote when I was 10. I wrote a story when I was about 10 to around 13 about how there's going to come a time on the earth where these chosen ones find these lost crystals from Atlantis, and they're going to remember what the crystals have programmed inside of them. And they're going to use the crystals to heal the earth in a time that seems like World War III. And it's going to inspire change on the planet where other people are going to want to do the same thing too. And people are going to develop these like magic powers, which have, it almost sounds kind of silly, but, it's like I always like to tell people, if you don't know your history, the people that control the history will use a magic power on you to make you believe that magic's not real, but they use magic on us. And the moment you snap out of that spell, it's like Harry Potter inspiring the world of muggles to become more magical, and it's an interesting time. It really is. It's a time where the more you know, the less afraid you become. And you don't even get sick as much. You learn to protect your electromagnetic field, which is a very important lesson. As people learn how to protect their aura, how people say you go into a room, you adapt to the energy of a room. What happens if you can go in a room and you change the energy in the room? And not only a room, you change the energy of your environment around you. And anytime negative energy tries to get on you, you have some sort of spiritual armor, some sort of crystal, some sort of prayer, some sort of energy practice that repels it all away. So it teaches you, like a cell that's healthy in a body, not to conform to the cancer vibration, right? Cancer to me is just like, it's a zodiac sign, right? And as people start to learn that there's multiple types of ways to heal yourself, they're going to start to look at the supernatural medicines.
Okay, now, Joe, I got a heavy question for you. If you want to pass on it, you can. But you're the guy that I would ask a question like this too. What is your take on the global pandemic we are now experiencing? Is it Mother Nature wanting us to get our act together? Is it the result of a laboratory accident that went terribly wrong? Or do you think it's something else?
I love that question. I want to start every interview with that question. But, I want to answer the question by saying, if you know a lot of things that's happening in the world, and you've been trying to tell people about it for more than 10 years, and they just kind of like write you off as crazy, this is like an event that will snap people out of the spell of being called crazy. Because over time, people are going to say, look, we've been locked up for more than 40, 50 days now. What's the end result here? And, I've been telling people for a while, there's an agenda in this world, whether people believe in it or not. But the agenda is to create a new world order. And that involves, problem, reaction, solution. So the problem is obviously something that they use this virus. It doesn't even have to be this virus. It could be SARS. It could be Zika, H1N1. It could be whatever virus. They could say, look, down the future, there's going to be another virus. When you live on the planet Mars, did you bring it from Earth? Is it a computer virus? Hollywood is making tons of movies about viruses, and they're always trying to test to see how people will react to them. So I tell people this virus is designed to crash the economy because the name COVID stands for Certificate of Vaccination ID. Their goal is to really make the world a cashless society. So they track every move, and they want to implant microchips in people so that they take your freedom away, and they say, if you want your freedom back, you got to take these microchips. And it's like for people who are like planning on taking over the world, and a lot of people who are Christians and read the final book in the Bible named Revelations, they're going to look at, like this mark of the beast. How do you plan to put the mark of the beast in people if they don't want to take it? Well, you crash the economy. And if they want their freedoms back, like to get their driver's license or to travel or to, get healthcare, they got to follow the rules. So a lot of these evil forces that have been planning this, I mean, I don't want to be very specific on this. I want people to guess, but there's a lot of it in Toronto. So for a lot of people that are like tuning in and kind of like questioning, hey, this is like a test they tried in Toronto many years ago with SARS, right? And then shortly after SARS, there was an event that happened close to 10 years ago in Toronto called the G20, where they did a martial law lockdown. So a lot of these things that they're testing, they're trying to see how well people cooperate in terms of creating this new world order. And this new world order is simple. They just want a world where they can control everyone. They can't control a lot of smart, healthy people, but it's very easy to control a lot of sick, poor people. So that's a lot of the plans that they've been saying for many years. They're always talking about a second wave. And for a lot of people that study energy, they're going to look around, they're going like, what are these cell phone towers doing? They don't look like natural towers. In fact, they're almost trying to hide these towers in trees, or they're trying to hide them in plain sight. What kind of energy are these towers emitting? Are they actually good for us? Or are they making people around us sick, which have the symptoms of that sickness? You got to look, who's involved, who's making the most money from this pandemic? Is it the big pharmaceutical companies, or is it, somebody else? And you kind of look, this year has been really interesting, like politically interesting. For a lot of people that are kind of like getting censored, talking about this online, they start to question more, right?
Yeah, I'm glad I asked you that question. I was debating, should I or shouldn't I? But if anyone's going to have a take on it, I knew it had to be you, and I was right. So thank you for that response. And you can open up a lot of people's eyes and ears. So that's a good thing. Now, if any of our viewers want to order your crystals or learn about your various projects that you're involved with, I know you're always involved with different things. How do they go about contacting you?
You can contact me directly. I have a cell phone number, but I also use social media a lot, and I check my Instagram page quite a lot. I'm always creating new accounts online, and if my name gets blocked out, I like to use the number 144. So I have an account on Instagram, which is my name, Joe, Joeigo, 144 Crystal. And I have several Facebook pages and YouTube channels, but sometimes you just gotta keep planting the seed in a fertile mind. You never know how much of those thoughts are gonna grow over time. And it is an exciting time to be alive. I truly believe it.
You're a philosopher too. You're a healer and a philosopher. That's cool. All I gotta say, Joeigo, I want to thank you for being my guest on the Paranormal Yakker. I wish you success with the mission you have set out for yourself. And if anybody again could do it, I know you for many years, it's going to be you. I wish you success with it.
God bless you. Thank you so much for being on your show. And so much has happened since the last time that I was on your show. And, this is what it's all about, right? This is a really exciting time. Always remember faith over fear. And the more faith you have, it's like the law of attraction on steroids. And for those that want to use the law of attraction on steroids, there's many techniques. Using a crystal is definitely a shortcut, kind of like us using a cell phone or a computer. We can communicate long distances to each other because there's crystals in our computer systems. How much more the crystals inside our body? Be the crystal that wants to change the world, not just the drop in the ocean, but the wave in the ocean.
Okay. Great way to end. Well, in a way, this is the beginning also. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would love for you to join me and my guests as I yak with them on Paranormal Yakker.